We need hungrier talent who can meet higher targets, Brian explained as he slid the termination papers across the polished conference table, his voice calm but rehearsed, like he had delivered the same line many times before. The company is moving in a new direction. My name is Darren McCabe. I'm 46 years old, and for the past 9 years I've served as Senior Account Executive at Triana Corp in Kansas City, Missouri. Nearly a decade of my life was spent building a client portfolio that generated almost 40% of the company's revenue, and I had done it without shortcuts, just long days, endless travel, and relationships carefully nurtured through trust and reliability. When Brian finished speaking, I forced a smile, thanked him for the opportunity, and walked out without argument, though inside my chest something heavy settled in. Brian Ellsworth had arrived just 6 months earlier as the new vice president of sales, brought in by the CEO to reinvigorate the team, though all I ever saw was a man in custom suits who spoke in tired motivational slogans and had never once bothered to join me on a client call. 3 weeks into his tenure, he introduced a commission structure that cut my earnings by 20% despite my consistently strong numbers, and that was the first sign the ground beneath me was beginning to shift. My desk was soon moved to a corner during renovations. My name disappeared from meeting invites, and yesterday I noticed IT service in my computer while I was at lunch. Each small detail on its own seemed harmless, but together they painted a clear picture. I knew this moment was coming, even if I had hoped I was wrong. I packed 9 years of my life into a single cardboard box. Family photos, a coffee mug my daughter had painted years ago, a folder of client contact information I kept separate from the company database. Just habit, really. Need help with that? Valerie from accounting asked kindly, her face filled with confusion. Are you changing offices? Something like that, I replied, unwilling to make a scene. In the elevator on my way down, I found myself next to Everett Stanton, our CEO. He nodded absently, eyes glued to his phone, too distracted to notice the box in my hands or the significance of what had just happened. He had no idea that Brian's decision would cut the company off from millions in revenue, but soon enough he would. Walking to the parking garage to my car, I felt no anger, no bitterness, only a strange sense of clarity, as if I had just woken from a long, comfortable dream and realized a house I thought was mine had never belonged to me at all. I drove home in silence, no music, no phone calls, just a low hum of the engine and my thoughts circling tomorrow. When I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Travis Ricks, my biggest client. The annual renewal was next week, and he wanted to confirm dinner reservations for when he'd be in town. He didn't know yet, none of them did. I set the phone on the kitchen counter and stared out the window, reflecting on 9 years of client relationships built entirely on my word and my reliability. Brian hadn't just fired an employee. He had severed the only real connection Trevant had to millions of dollars in revenue, and he had no idea. I thought back to when I first joined, back before Triana became Trevant, when it was still Midwestern Financial Services with a smaller office and far fewer resources. Everett himself had hired me away from a competitor, where I had hit my targets, but been repeatedly passed over for promotion. I want someone who knows this market, someone clients trust, he'd told me. And for 7 years, he was right to trust me. I grew our client base from local businesses to national accounts, expanded contract terms from 1 year to 5, and brought in accounts no one thought possible. Lockhart Manufacturing after they left our biggest competitor, the Henderson Group when the odds were stacked against us. Rebecca, my wife, used to joke I was married to my clients. Thursday night dinners with the Johnsons again, she'd tease, already knowing the answer. The kids learned to expect my absence at ball games and recitals. Dad's working, becoming their normal. I always promised it would be worth it someday. 3 promotions, 2 office expansions, and 1 recession later, the company grew from a $4 million operation to a $30 million enterprise, with my accounts responsible for about $12 million of that. Not that anyone had ever calculated it so precisely until Brian came along. The first rail warning came during a quarterly review when Brian pointed at a chart and said, "Your client acquisition rate has flatlined." I explained that I was focused on deepening existing relationships, that I had just doubled the Lockhart contract. But he dismissed it. "The future is in new business," he said. We need hunters, not farmers. After that, the small cuts began. My assistant Julia reassigned, my travel requests requiring extra approval, expense reports scrutinized for trivial details. Then came whispers of fresh talent being interviewed, young MBAs with slick presentations and no industry knowledge. Brian called them disruptors. Last month, he hired Alicia Winters, 29, from a tech startup. During her first week, she was assigned to shadow me on a call with Travis. Without explanation, or even a proper introduction, Travis noticed immediately, texting afterward. "Who's the new girl? Are you training your replacement?" I brushed it off with a laugh, saying we were just expanding the team. But that night, driving home, a knot twisted in my gut. I had spent years learning to read boardrooms and client expressions, and my instincts told me something was deeply wrong. I should have trusted that feeling sooner. Now, back in my kitchen, I set the box on the counter and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. The house was quiet. Rebecca was in Denver helping her sister with a newborn, which was probably for the best. I needed silence. I scrolled through my personal phone, which held a real network. Over 200 clients, vendors, and decision-makers whose trust one had earned. People who worked with Trevant because of me, not the logo on our letterhead. The disabled work phone in the box contained only sterile company correspondence, but my personal device held the dinner invitations, the golf outings, the private cell numbers of CEOs. I sipped the bourbon. The burn grounding me as a strange calm replaced any panic. 9 years of 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners, and canceled vacations. All invested into something I believed was mine, only to discover I had been building a foundation for someone else's house. I opened my laptop and scanned my contract. The non-compete clause was there but weak. Just 1 year, and only if I resigned voluntarily. Termination voided it. There was nothing stopping me from taking my clients elsewhere. My phone buzzed again. Travis confirming dinner for Thursday, eager to discuss renewal. His contract alone was worth $1.7 million annually. Lockhart Manufacturing had been with me for 6 years, and even before that I had worked with him for 3 at my old firm. Nearly a decade of trust. And he wasn't alone. The Henderson Group, Westfield Properties, Carlton Industries, all together worth another $1.5 million, with renewals looming within the next month. Every one of those accounts dealt exclusively through me. I set the glass down, the decision crystallizing in my mind. I wouldn't call anyone tonight, wouldn't send angry emails or make threats. I'd sleep on it, wake clear-headed, and then make exactly 3 phone calls. Not to complain, but to inform the people who mattered most that I was no longer with Trevant. The rest would unfold naturally. I reached into the box, pulled out the family photos, and held them for a moment, feeling the weight of both the years behind me and the future that was suddenly, unexpectedly wide open. My daughter's graduation, my son's wedding, the trip to Yellowstone we almost canceled because of a client emergency. I'd missed too much already, and deep down I knew tomorrow had to mark the beginning of different choices. I finished my bourbon and climbed the stairs to sleep in an empty house. And for the first time in years, I didn't set an alarm. No early flights to catch, no quarterly projections waiting before dawn. Only the strange, steady calm that came with knowing Brian Ellsworth had made a catastrophic mistake, and all I had to do now was step aside and let it unravel on its own. The next morning, I made my 3 calls. No dramatics, no bitterness, just facts. Travis, I'm no longer with Trevant as of yesterday. Wanted you to hear it directly from me. His response came fast. What happened? Who's handling our account now? I told him Brian would probably reach out, or maybe Alicia Winters. A long pause followed. The girl from the meeting? She doesn't know our business. That was all I could say. The rest was his decision. Similar conversations followed with James Henderson and Peter Carlton. I offered no pitches, no persuasion, just clear information delivered with the same steadiness they had always expected from me. By noon, my personal phone was vibrating nonstop. The industry was small, word traveled fast. At 2, Everett Stanton called. I let it ring into voicemail. Darren, this is Everett. We need to talk about your transition. Several clients are expressing concerns. Please call me back immediately. I didn't. Instead, I drove downtown to meet with Lawrence Finch, an attorney I knew well. Years ago, I had helped his son-in-law secure financing for a restaurant, and now he owed me a favor. After reviewing my papers, Lawrence leaned back and said, "They can't stop you from working, but they'll try to scare your clients from following you. Be ready for that." By 4, Trevant's legal department sent a formal reminder about confidentiality. By 5, Brian texted, "Let's discuss your exit package. There might be room for consulting work." Too late. At 5:30, my phone buzzed again. "Just got off a call with your CEO and that VP who fired you," Travis wrote. "They promised continuity. Said Alicia would handle everything personally. Then they offered me a 10% discount on renewal. What did you tell them?" "That I'd think about it," I replied. Silence on my end, but then Travis continued. "I've already sent notice terminating our contract, citing change in relationship management. Henderson and Carlton did the same." I said nothing, but his next message sealed it. "Darren, where are you landing? Because wherever it is, that's where our business is going." That night, 3 more companies from my portfolio sent termination notices. By morning, the total was 8 accounts gone, representing more than $3.2 million in contracts. Everett called an emergency board meeting. I knew because Julia, my former assistant, texted me. "Complete chaos here. Brian's trying to blame you for client tampering. CEO asking why nobody saw this coming." My phone rang again, an unfamiliar number. "Darren McCabe?" "Speaking. Michael Grantley here. Grantley and Company. I hear you're available, and several of our mutual friends speak very highly of you." I leaned back, listening. Senior vice president position, 6-figure signing bonus, full autonomy to manage your accounts, a seat on our executive committee. When would you want to start? I didn't hesitate. How's tomorrow sound? I accepted not out of desperation, but because it was exactly what I had been working toward: respect, freedom, and recognition for the value I had built. That afternoon, Brian texted again. "Board approved a retention package. Full salary for 6 months, plus stock options. Just help us transition your accounts." I didn't respond. They'd had 9 years to value me, and now they were scrambling to buy back what they had thrown away. Too little, far too late. 1 week into my new role at Grantley and Company, Julia called me from her personal phone. "You need to know what really happened," she said. I sat in my new corner office, larger, brighter, more mine than the one I'd left, and listened as the last 9 years reshaped into sharper focus. "They're planning to sell the firm," Julia explained. "Veritas Capital made an offer 2 months ago, but with conditions. They wanted their own account managers handling the major clients, integrated with their portfolio companies." The pieces clicked immediately. Brian hadn't been hired to grow sales. He had been brought in to strip me out, to untangle clients from my name and reattach them to the company, turning relationships into assets that could be sold. My firing wasn't about failure. It was about preparing the firm for acquisition. "How do you know this?" I asked. "I'm still assigned to the executive suite. I see the documents. Hear the conversations. Yesterday, Veritas pulled their offer. They won't buy without the client base you built." After we hung up, I sat in silence, staring at the city lights outside my window. 9 years of loyalty, and they'd been ready to cut me out like a liability. Not because I hadn't succeeded, but because I had succeeded too well. The ties I built were too strong, too personal, too unshakable. They needed me gone before those bonds proved bigger than the company itself. Now the offer was gone, and I was here, reading emails from more former clients who had already reached out. The industry was buzzing with the news. Darren McCabe had moved to Grantley, and clients were following. Trevant stock had dropped 12% in just 5 days when my phone buzzed with a text from Everett. "Can we meet? Just you and me. No lawyers." I stared at the screen, the message settling in my stomach like cold lead. It wasn't just that I'd been fired. It was a deliberate betrayal, the realization that I'd been sacrificed as part of a calculated corporate chess game. For a long moment, I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Travis Hendricks. "I need to ask you something," I said quietly. "Did Trevant try to introduce you to anyone from Veritas Capital in the last few months?" There was a pause before his reply. How did you know? They brought in some guy, Thomas, during our quarterly review, said he was a strategic advisor looking at our industry, asked a lot of questions about our future needs. The confirmation hit like a punch. They had been parading Veritas representatives in front of my clients, laying the groundwork for transition, all while I was still at Trevant, still trusting I was building something that mattered. Call after call revealed the same story. Behind my back, meetings scheduled, questions asked, relationships probed for weaknesses. By the end of the day, I confirmed at least 6 of my major accounts had been quietly introduced to Veritas, all under the guise of strategic advisors. That night, I finally texted Everett back. No meeting necessary. I understand the Veritas situation completely. His reply came quickly. It was a business decision, Darren. Nothing personal. But it was personal. 9 years of building relationships, of knowing clients' kids' names and their favorite vacation spots, of answering calls on holidays, all reduced to nothing more than an obstacle in the way of a corporate transaction. I closed my laptop and stared out at the Kansas City skyline from my new office. The view was different here, clearer somehow, as though the city itself was reminding me that I had already moved forward. Grantley had signed contracts with 11 of my former clients, representing nearly $5 million in annual revenue, with more on the way, not because I had recruited them, but because trust followed people, not corporate logos or strategies. Trevant hadn't just lost a salesman. They had lost the very foundation their growth was built upon, and they still didn't understand why. 3 weeks into my new role at Grantley, an invitation arrived. I was asked to speak at the Midwest Financial Services Conference on building client loyalty in a transactional market. The irony wasn't lost on me. I accepted, not out of ego or ambition, but because I knew exactly who would be in that audience: industry peers, potential clients, and most importantly, Everett and the board members who had dismantled everything I'd built. Grantley had given me resources Trevant never had. 2 dedicated analysts, a marketing team, and most importantly, an equity partnership. Every client I brought in didn't just earn me commission. It built something I partly owned. I poured myself into the work, spending late nights with my analysts gathering data, compiling performance metrics for every client who had followed me from Trevant. The results spoke louder than any speech ever could. Average service response time reduced by 53%, implementation costs down 30%, client satisfaction scores up 22 points. This wasn't just about me. It was proof of what happened when companies value relationships over transactions. The morning of the conference, I rehearsed my words one last time. No theatrics, no naming names, just facts and outcomes, professional and measured, but devastating in their implications. As I walked into the hotel ballroom, I spotted Everett immediately, flanked by 2 board members near the coffee station. His face tightened when our eyes met. I gave a polite nod and kept walking. The panel began with generic questions about market trends and disruption, but when my turn came, I spoke plainly. In an age where everything is automated and digitized, personal accountability is the rarest commodity. Companies mistake client relationships for assets that belong to them. They don't. Trust lives between individuals, and it must be constantly reinforced. I presented my data as case studies, never naming Trevant, but everyone in that room knew the truth. The lesson isn't about retention bonuses or restrictive contracts. I concluded, it's about understanding that when you treat relationship managers as interchangeable, clients will show you just how wrong that assumption is. During the Q&A, a young analyst asked the question everyone else was thinking. Isn't your move from Trevant to Grantley, along with several clients, exactly what companies fear when they hesitate to give relationship managers autonomy? The room went silent. I felt Everett's stare burning across the space. That's a fair question, I said calmly. But here's the truth. Trevant didn't lose those clients because I took them. They lost them because they failed to understand what those clients truly valued. They didn't follow me out of loyalty alone. They followed because their needs were being met in ways my former employer no longer prioritized. Every company has a right to change direction, but every client has a right to decide if that direction still serves them. The market is brutally efficient that way. By the end of the conference, Grantley had secured letters of intent with 5 new accounts worth another $2.7 million in annual revenue. That evening, I read the headlines. Trevon announced a restructuring. The Veritas acquisition was dead. Brian Ellsworth was pursuing other opportunities, and their stock had fallen another 8%. I shut my laptop, not with triumph, but with quiet certainty. The market had spoken. Whether they would learn from it was no longer my concern. 6 months later, I stood in Grantley's largest conference room, quarterly results glowing on the screen. $8.4 million in new business, 70% of it from former Trevon clients. Michael Grantley raised a glass. Best acquisition we've ever made, and we didn't even have to buy a company to get it. Laughter filled the room. I smiled but didn't join in. This wasn't celebration. It was validation. A news alert buzzed my phone. Everett Stanton had stepped down as CEO. I slipped it back into my pocket silently. Some victories don't need an audience. That afternoon, I received an email from Alicia Winters, the woman they had once tried to position as my replacement. She'd been let go with most of the sales team. Any chance Grantley is hiring? I forwarded it to HR with a note, worth interviewing. Not her fault. Later, my assistant handed me a couriered envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from Everett. You were right. I put transaction above relationship. Cost the company everything. If you're ever willing to have coffee, I'd like to apologize in person. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my pocket. Maybe someday. Not yet. Driving home that night, I passed Trevon's building. Workers were removing the sign. The once bold logo now just faint outlines against a stone facade. I didn't slow down, didn't take a photo, just drove on, eyes fixed forward toward the life I was building on my own terms. 1 year to the day after being terminated, I signed the documents making me a full partner at Grantley. The firm had grown 34% since my arrival, my portfolio now representing nearly $20 million in annual revenue. Rebecca brought in 2 coffees and placed one on my desk. Signed and official, she said with a smile. I nodded. Signed and official. She studied me. You don't look as happy as I expected. I shook my head. I'm thinking about what I'm building here, about doing it right this time. That morning, I had approved the hiring of 3 new account managers, each with the same profit-sharing structure I had fought for myself. No one would pour their soul into building something here, only to have it stripped away. That was my first act as partner. Later, after a congratulatory call from a client who told me, we just followed the value, I looked at the framed parchment Rebecca had gifted me last Christmas. The best revenge is massive success. I placed it face down on the credenza. That chapter was over. Before shutting down my computer, I sent an email scheduling lunch with Everett, not to gloat, but because sometimes letting go of the past is the final step to moving forward. When I left the office that evening, Rebecca and I were heading to our son's band performance, something I never would have made time for in my old life. Some losses clear the way for better victories. Some fires burn away what needs to go. And as I drove toward the music and the people who mattered most, I knew with absolute certainty that I had never been more right about anything in my life.